Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Terrence Duncan, and we're going to talk about Module 10 of the dissertation journey. And the title of this particular module is the Scholar-Practitioner Approach Toward Synthesis of the Literature. You may recall in lesson 9 from the 9th module titled Self-Awareness for Doctoral Candidates, we had discussed Perry's theory of intellectual and ethical development. We also discussed how to identify the 4 categories within the theory in applying it towards educational development. First category is a solution, and go through the particular process and make it more finer. You're going to have to see a little more, and you're going to know how to find ways to address problems. Finally, the academic voice includes the different those gaps that have been found in the literature. Mesereau's theory, the author had a theory known as the transformational learning theory, and that theory was produced in 1991. And what that entails is the evolution of thought through a particular set of experiences, learning how to assess your assumptions, and also you understand that typical learning development process found within doctoral students will incorporate such assumptions and those experiences, as well as some of their personal insight into the development of their dissertation and other academic works. I provided the constructs of Mesereau's theory for your review. Some of them you may realize that you're actually doing this as of today, such as understanding the meaning of our experience. You're learning how to make your own interpretations, and that you are focused on the experiences in the world. There are 3 elements of the scholar-practitioner model. Taylor had defined those elements as the individual experience, critical reflection, and dialogue. Approach and problem identification. These 3 steps are recommended for students not only just to approach their dissertation problem or the scope of their study, but even their homework assignments, essays, or even ongoing research. You have to understand that numerous problems do exist. So you can look at one particular subject and identify 100 problems, but which ones are worth studying? So you have to pretty much go from a broader sense to a more specific sense and saying, okay, this particular problem has this particular type of impact, and it provides, the results of the research can benefit this particular set of the population. Another approach towards problem identification is the utilization of leadership theories and experience, which helps guide the identification of complex problems. So that's why in a lot of the homework assignments and a lot of the resources provided to you by the university, you're going to see a lot about leadership theories. It's important to understand this leadership theory because it does provide some form of guidance for the approach of your problem identification, as well as the approach of developing a way to find a solution to such problems. Finally, complex problems require in-depth study and research, which is why your academic voice is relevant compared to just recycling or regurgitating the information. So you want to be able to look at the information and then be able to provide it in your context within the scope of the problem you seek to study. Synthesis of the literature, something that I do hammer for any of my doctoral candidates, as well as my students who are working on their dissertation. The synthesis of the literature involves a transition from the graduate to academic writing, which often is difficult for many students. And trust me, I definitely get it. I remember when I first started working on my dissertation and actually going through the program, I had a very difficult time synthesizing the literature. I was pretty similar to like many other students when they first come in. They're often recycling the work of what they read from maybe another source, and they're using the same source again and again. That's not much evolution of thought. So it's definitely relatable, but I can guarantee you that if you stick to the research and you continue to research and use modules such as this and others that may be available, you'll have a better transition from graduate writing to academic writing. Metacognition involves awareness and understanding of one's own thought process, and the development of academic voice takes practice and patience. It's something, when you get your feedback, whether it's an assignment or an essay or maybe a draft of your dissertation, you have to understand that everybody has gone through the same type of constructive criticism, They receive the same levels of feedback. Some of it may seem like it could hurt your feelings. Some of it may make you kind of question as to whether or not you are deserving in this program. I can guarantee that if you spoke to any professor and have them recall some of the experience they went through during their doctoral program, more likely they're going to have the same, there's a level of relatability. And so you have to understand that the practice makes the academic voice become a little bit more refined, and you have to have patience. And if you, again, base your decisions and your research to help refine your voice, the synthesis of the literature process becomes much easier. Keep in mind that your feedback from your doctoral instructors should advance and challenge the evolution of your academic voice. So you shouldn't be content or be complacent because you got a 10 out of 10 on one assignment in week one and expect that to happen the rest of the term. You should be more focused on advancing your voice and refining where necessary. And so if you really go through the process the correct way, your professor should be challenging you to be progressively more advanced per term. If you're in a classroom setting or if you're working on a dissertation, your doctoral instructor should be challenging you to go deeper. So it may look fine one time through one pass, and then somebody else may look at it another way and say, okay, well, this needs to be a little bit more clear. And that is the evolution of academic voice. Early common mistakes by doctoral learners. These are some of the observations I've seen in the years that I have been teaching, and I provided some comments, and one of them includes the approach to the dissertation process with the solution prior to conduct the research. Common thing I hear from every student. And even for those I have consulted outside of academics, they say, okay, this is going to be my research problem. And this is you have to see if there are relations, if you need to see if there's any complex things to explore, additional details to be probing into. A dissertation or any kind of approach to a research problem is not as simplistic as people make it out to be. So you have to understand that if you don't do so by a strong literature review, you're not going to address the gaps or build upon a context within your scope of study. So again, it's about thematic literature review. It's about the extant literature review. It's about how you synthesize the literature review that helps build a case for your particular scope of study. Recall Perry's theory of intellectual and ethical development. We talked about it in Module 9 and touched up on it briefly just earlier, but just recall the 4 stages of the theory of intellectual and ethical development. When you get to stage 1, that's when you have the most basic, I have a problem, here's the solution. By the time you get to stage 4, category 4, you start having more ambiguity, and that you embrace ambiguity because you understand that some complex problems requires ongoing research. And so that one-off study is not going to solve the problems that has been identified for your particular scope of study. And finally, not providing a complex literature review, not providing the sound synthesis of the literature. Those generally affect the alignment of your dissertation and scope of study. So some pitfalls to avoid and how to do so: you should increase the regularity of writing at a doctoral level, and it should extend outside the classroom. So you don't have to really sound like a PhD when you're texting your friends or talking to your friends on the phone or family, but when you are sending communication, written communication, official communication, write it at a doctoral level. Be able to use active voice. Make sure that you're not using passive voice. Make sure that you are make sure that you're carefully formulating your response by linking your general points with supporting documents or supporting research. And make sure that the second one is to distinguish differences between graduate and doctoral writing. Most people coming into the doctoral program, they don't have all the tools and resources at the beginning to start the program, and which is why you don't go straight into the dissertation. You have to practice the writing. The graduate writing is usually on broader topics. So it may talk about, in the healthcare economics, you could talk about something to the effect of supply and demand. Well, okay, well, what about supply and demand? Are you talking about supply and demand of DMEs? Or are you talking about supply and demand of a particular vaccine? When I say those last 2 points, that's actually more specific. Furthermore, the graduate writing also features more of what I call recycling, where you're looking at literature and you're just basically saying, well, so-and-so said and so-and-so said. Tell us what so-and-so means, or tell us what so-and-so said and what does it mean to you as a researcher. You want to refrain from relying on personal bias and experience as foundations of your doctoral research. You have to understand that emotions generate the bias. And so try to avoid colloquial writing, conversational writing. Try to, again, go back to the doctoral level, academic voice, very linear in nature type approach towards your writing and your research. There's nothing wrong using personal experiences, to help formulate the steps for setting up your dissertation, but that shouldn't be the root of your research experience. So for me, being an African American, I could talk about the lack of advancement in corporate America and healthcare for African American men. And even though that's something that I have experienced before in the industry, I can easily do the research to show the facts and be able to connect all these data points and all this literature to the general scope of the problem, and then develop a research to be able to examine that. And even though that it affected me personally as an African-American male, the study is designed to ensure that we understand the complex issues surrounding the decision-making that affects how people like myself do not wind up getting the promotions that we supposedly deserve. You also want to be able to connect the assumptions and statements with academic references. So if I do make a statement, and I do this actually regularly now, even outside of instruction, that I try not to make statements unless I know the facts. And so as a researcher, you want to make sure that you're always connecting your assumptions and your statements with the academic reference. And those academic references should come from peer-reviewed journals. And peer-reviewed journals entails different academics looking at a particular problem or a general publication concern, and they provide a critique on what other people submit. And that is a peer-reviewed journal. Where you have a blog or Harvard Business Review or something from an industrial organizational website, it's not like the information is not valid. It is valid, but the problem is that the information provided in that particular piece may not have been vetted by other academics in the field. So you might actually have more opinions, and you might even have some more of reflective bias provided within these particular statements. So when you are trying to synthesize the literature, you need to ask, what is your favorite song or movie? Metaphorically, the synthesis of the literature resembles telling someone about your favorite movie or song. And you explain in your words what a song or movie is about. Critiquing a song or movie in your context and using statements to provide clarity of thought and refrains from strong opinions. So for a personal example, when I tell students, I say, well, tell me what your favorite song is, and I'll use my favorite song. One of my favorite songs or an artist is Prince, and When Doves Cry is the song. And so if I wanted to talk about When Doves Cry, I can say, okay, well, this song is about a troubled young man who lives with his parents, and their parents are always fighting. There's domestic abuse that's going on, and he just wants change. And even though that his lyrics are not using those particular thematic words, that was my summarization of that particular song. So I synthesized that particular song and said, okay, the citation would be When Doves Cry, Prince, Purple Rain soundtrack. Tell me what this song means. Tell me what that movie means. If you like something like WandaVision, tell me what WandaVision is about. You're never going to tell me word for word what Wanda said or word for word what this particular show is about, but you're going to tell me in your words what the overall story is, and then you can provide a critique of certain episodes, and you can point to the certain elements in that episode to help substantiate some of the criticism. That is synthesis of the literature in a metaphorical fashion. Chiampa and Wolf provided 4 steps to prepare for dissertation and lit review, and this development approach involves the following, which includes thinking analytically, planning to do the literature review, synthesizing the literature, and organizing the time effectively. I put down project management, and I cannot underscore how important it is for you as you go through this process. And if you are currently going through the writing aspects of this particular process, to note that set your time for set optimal times for you to write. And I understand that we have work obligations, family obligations. If you have children, you have sports activities and whatnot, you have to find your effective write time and make sure that you're dedicating time every week for writing and research. If you set a limit. So let's say that I'm gonna write 3 hours every week, or I'm gonna read 3 hours every week. You just got to go through the practice. And when you are working, if you can get yourself somewhat in a solid schedule, then you should be able to navigate through the dissertation process more effectively, because you have to incorporate your family time, you have to incorporate your personal time, you have to incorporate your downtime. The dissertation is not a sprint, it is a marathon, and it's designed to be a marathon because there's a reason why only 2% of people in this country have a terminal degree. And just the ability to use project management is one of the key tools, regardless of how you write, to be able to overcome the process. Wanted to provide several actions to take while you're synthesizing literature. You need to note that it's a systematic approach to collecting and analyzing literature. You have to understand that the artifacts often come from peer-reviewed sources. Follow the standards repeated globally. So if you have the feedback that your paper is not in alignment, or you have too much space in between the headings and the text, or if you are providing your citations and references and they're not in the correct format, that is a concern, because if you do this while you're writing a dissertation, it's going to get kicked back immediately and tell you to fix it. You should be in the practice of editing, proofing, and submitting a clean copy of anything to any assignment, whether it's a chapter in your dissertation, whether it's just a discussion question, whether it's just a simple essay. Do not wait on the last second. Take the approach, take the time to develop your approach to say, okay, this is how I'm going to research the topic, and this is how I'm going to formulate my response. Students who often say, okay, well, I have this thought, I'm going to pull this article because the abstract looks appealing, or the title sounds something that you can relate to. That's not good. That's not good literature review, and that's going to normally affect the way that you're going to have alignment issues within your writing. So take the time, do the peer review journal, stay within the 5 years, because you want to study problems that are very relevant within the industry, and your research will reflect that relevancy as well. Another step to take in synthesizing literature is to examine the purpose, method, and results of the literature in question. Make sure, is this research article relevant to the scope of what I'm discussing, or am I just throwing stuff together just to take up space? If you're doing the latter, that means that you're going to continue to struggle in the process. Again, it's about patience, practice, and precision. One other thing to note is that an underdeveloped literature review creates alignment challenges throughout the study. You've heard me say it from maybe module 2 to the present, and you'll hear me say it until the particular journey is over. Literature review, alignment, literature review, alignment, synthesis, literature review, alignment. Those terms you're going to hear over and over and over again. Here are the references for this particular module. And if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to contact me. And thank you again for listening to this particular recording.